Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. And if you're new here, get comfortable, because today we're strapping into the time machine and heading straight back to the decade that gave us big hair, bigger dreams, and some of the most unforgettable pop culture moments in American history. That's right, we're talking about the 1980s, the decade of neon, mixtapes, and Friday nights that somehow felt more magical than anything on a screen today. If you grew up anywhere near this era, you already know exactly what I'm talking. This was a decade that didn't just entertain you, it built entire rituals around having fun. Whether that meant standing in front of a glowing arcade cabinet with a pocket full of quarters, or racing home after school hoping you didn't miss your favorite video on MTV. These weren't just things people did, they were the heartbeat of an entire generation's childhood. In today's video, we're counting down 10 things from the 1980s guaranteed to hit you right in the nostalgia. From the arcade games that defined a generation of gamers, to the video store that shaped Friday nights everywhere, to the music, the toys, and even the actors who became the faces of an entire era. Some of these you probably remember like it was yesterday. Others might surprise you with just how deep the story actually goes. So grab a snack, settle in, and get ready to travel back to a time before smartphones, before streaming, and before everything was just a click away. This is 10 things from the 1980s that bring back the nostalgia. And trust me, by the end of this one, you're going to want to call up an old friend and reminisce. Let's get into it.
Arcade games were a huge part of growing up in this decade. Housed in big, brightly lit cabinets covered in bold artwork, they popped up in dedicated arcades, shopping malls, bowling alleys, and even the occasional pizza restaurant. Kids fed in quarters to play titles like Pac-Man, Centipede, and Donkey Kong, all beloved for gameplay that was easy to pick up but nearly impossible to put down. Pac-Man alone became a cultural phenomenon, spawning cereal, a Saturday morning cartoon, and a chart-topping novelty song. This stretch of time, roughly the late 1970s through the mid-1980s, is often called the golden age of arcade gaming, marked by fast-moving technology and soaring popularity. Game designers were racing to outdo one another, and each new cabinet promised sharper graphics, catchier sound effects, and higher scores to chase. Arcades turned into social gathering spots where friends met up after school, competed for bragging rights, and showed off their high scores to anyone who'd watch. Some kids became local legends simply for having their initials sitting at the top of a leaderboard for weeks at a time. By 1981, the arcade industry in America was pulling in a jaw-dropping $8 billion, more than the movie and pop music industries combined that same year. Eventually, the rise of home consoles like the Nintendo Entertainment System would pull some of that traffic away from arcades. But for a solid stretch of the decade, the arcade was simply where you wanted to be. Parents would drop off a group of kids with a pocket full of quarters and pick them up hours later, confident they'd been perfectly entertained the whole time. Some arcades even ran informal tournaments on weekends, drawing crowds that would circle around the best players just to watch a high-level run unfold in real time.
MTV, short for music television, launched on August 1st, 1981, and it changed cable TV forever. It was the first channel dedicated entirely to playing music videos around the clock, hosted by on-air personalities known as VJs, or video jockeys, who felt more like friends than broadcasters. The channel started small, available in only a handful of markets, but it caught on fast and eventually went global, becoming appointment viewing for teenagers everywhere. Before MTV, music videos were mostly promotional afterthoughts. After MTV, they became an art form in their own right, with directors competing to make videos as memorable as the songs themselves. MTV helped turn music videos into a major industry force, and even helped fuel a second wave of British bands crossing over into the American market, since acts like Duran Duran and Culture Club had polished, visually striking videos ready to air right from the start. As the years passed, the channel's lineup shifted toward game shows, reality programming, and music news, eventually moving away from wall-to-wall videos altogether. The very first video MTV ever aired was Video Killed the Radio Star by the Buggles, a fittingly self-aware choice that seemed to predict the very shift in music culture the channel itself was about to cause. Artists quickly realized that a striking video could make or break a single, and some, like Michael Jackson with Thriller, turned the format into a short film in its own right, complete with its own choreography, narrative, and cultural moment. For a lot of teenagers, MTV wasn't just background noise, it was appointment television, something you rushed home to catch before dinner in case your favorite video happened to be in rotation that hour.
A trip to Blockbuster was a weekend ritual for countless families and groups of friends. Founded in 1985 by David Cook, the chain quickly became the go-to destination for renting movies and video games, eventually eclipsing smaller mom-and-pop video stores across the country. Customers would wander the aisles of VHS and Betamax tapes, hunting for the newest release or a favorite they'd already rewatched a dozen times, often debating for 20 minutes before settling on a title. The bright blue and yellow logo became instantly recognizable, and the smell of buttery popcorn from the in-store concession stand is still a vivid memory for a lot of people who grew up in this era. Blockbuster stores became a defining piece of American pop culture, standing out from smaller video rental shops of the time thanks to their massive selection and family-friendly reputation. At its height, the company ran more than 9,000 locations worldwide and was opening a brand new store roughly every single day, a staggering pace of growth that made it feel unstoppable at the time. Renting a movie meant circling the release date on a calendar, racing to beat the crowds on Friday night, and hoping your favorite title wasn't already checked out. Late fees became such a running joke that they practically entered the cultural lexicon of the era. Membership cards were treated almost like a badge of honor, and the sight of the store's shelves fully restocked after a big release was practically an event in itself. Employees would often tape up handwritten recommendation cards under new releases, giving the whole experience a personal touch that's hard to find in modern streaming menus. The Rubik's Cube, a three-dimensional twisting puzzle, was invented in 1974 by Erno Rubik, a Hungarian architecture professor. He originally called it the Magic Cube and built it not as a toy, but as a teaching tool to help his students visualize three-dimensional movement and structural mechanics. Its smaller cube segments could rotate freely along 3 axes without the whole thing falling apart, which was itself considered an engineering marvel at the time. By the early 80s, it had become a worldwide craze, stumping kids and adults alike with a puzzle that looked deceptively simple but hid millions of possible combinations. Speed cubing competitions began popping up almost immediately, with the very first World Championship held in 1982, and solvers were already chasing times under 23 seconds. It grew into more than a toy, becoming something of a symbol for cleverness, patience, and problem-solving, showing up everywhere from classrooms to late-night talk shows. As of March 2021, more than 450 million cubes had been sold, making it the best-selling puzzle toy in history, and the object itself has become permanently associated with 1980s design and culture at large. Toy stores struggled to keep the cube in stock during its peak years, and it wasn't unusual to see people carrying one around just to twist and turn it absent-mindedly while waiting in line or riding the bus, long before fidget toys became their own category of product decades later. Aerobics exploded as a fitness trend in the 80s, blending rhythmic movement with stretching and strength work, usually set to upbeat music, and taught in-group classes led by an energetic instructor. The craze really took off after Jane Fonda released her workout video in 1982, which set off a whole industry of celebrity-branded fitness tapes that followed in its footsteps throughout the decade. Suddenly, living rooms across the country doubled as makeshift studios, with families pushing the couch aside to follow along on their television screens. The look became just as iconic as the workout itself, with sweatbands, leotards, tube socks, leg warmers, and scrunchies becoming the unofficial uniform of the era, whether or not you actually attended a single class. Gyms began adding dedicated aerobics rooms with mirrored walls, and studios sprang up in strip malls across the suburbs to meet the sudden demand. Classes ranged widely in intensity to suit different fitness levels, from low-impact routines aimed at beginners to high-energy sessions built for serious athletes. The underlying aerobic exercise method itself had actually been developed earlier by Dr. Kenneth H. Cooper and Colonel Pauline Potts of the U.S. Air Force back in the late 1960s and 1970s, long before it became a pop culture phenomenon with a soundtrack and a spandex dress code. Local television stations even began airing their own early morning aerobics programs, letting viewers work out at home before school or work. And the format proved popular enough that it stuck around on daytime TV well into the following decade.
The 80s also brought a fierce format war between two videotape systems, Betamax and VHS. Sony released Betamax first, in 1975, but JVC followed soon after with VHS, short for Video Home System, and the two formats spent the better part of a decade fighting for space on shop shelves and in living rooms. VHS won consumers over largely because its tapes could record for much longer, up to 6 hours on a single cassette in some modes, even though Betamax was often considered to have sharper picture quality by hobbyists and technical reviewers. By the early 80s, VHS players and tapes were outselling Betamax by a wide margin, and video rental stores stocked more and more VHS titles, which only accelerated the format's dominance in a classic feedback loop. Consumers wanted the format with more available movies, and studios wanted to release movies on the format more consumers already owned. Betamax may have gotten there first, but VHS took the crown, controlling about 90% of the U.S. home video market by 1987, effectively ending the format war for good and turning Betamax into a cautionary tale still referenced in business school classrooms today. Video store clerks became unlikely arbiters of the format war, and many households ended up owning both types of players at once, just to make sure they never missed out on a title only available on one format or the other, at least until Betamax production quietly wound down entirely by the mid-1990s.
Glam metal, also called hair metal, became a defining sound of 80s music culture. It mixed classic heavy metal with catchy, pop-leaning hooks and guitar work, producing high-energy anthems alongside emotional power ballads that dominated radio airplay throughout the decade. Bands like Motley Crue, Bon Jovi, and Poison were known as much for their look, teased hair, bold makeup, and flashy spandex outfits, as for their music, and the genre's visual identity became inseparable from its sound. These acts thrived especially between 1983 and 1991, with their videos in constant rotation on MTV, which gave the genre a national stage it might never have reached through radio alone. The Sunset Strip in Los Angeles became the genre's unofficial capital, with clubs like the Whiskey A Go-Go and the Roxy serving as launching pads for band after band chasing a record deal. Lyrically, the songs leaned heavily on themes of romance and desire, which helped them reach a broad audience well beyond the traditional heavy metal fanbase. The glam metal lifestyle, full of wild parties and headline-grabbing excess, became tabloid fodder throughout the decade, and many of the genre's biggest stars later spoke candidly about the toll that lifestyle eventually took. Big hair alone required entire bottles of hairspray per show, and the genre's aesthetic became so recognizable that it was often parodied even at the height of its popularity, though the bands themselves rarely seemed to mind, treating the spectacle as just as much a part of the act as the music itself.
Trivial Pursuit, the trivia-based board game, was dreamed up in 1979 by Chris Haney and Scott Abbott after the two discovered pieces missing from their Scrabble set and decided, almost as a joke, to design something of their own instead of buying a replacement. It hit shelves in 1981 and quickly became a household staple, mixing fun with a genuine test of general knowledge that appealed to both casual players and serious trivia buffs. Players move around the board answering questions from 6 categories, ranging from geography to entertainment, collecting a colored wedge for each one, and the game ends when someone fills their piece and answers a final question correctly in front of the whole table. By 1986, the game had sold 20 million copies and generated $600 million in sales, proof of just how big the craze had gotten during its peak years. Entire game nights were built around it. Spin-off editions arrived, covering everything from sports to Star Wars, and the game's iconic pie-shaped tokens became instantly recognizable well beyond the tabletop itself. Its success also helped kick off a broader boom in adult-oriented board games throughout the decade, as toy companies rushed to capture some of the same magic with their own trivia and party game spin-offs, though few ever came close to matching the original staying power.
Cabbage Patch Kids, dolls with soft cloth bodies and plastic heads, were first manufactured by Coleco Industries in 1982. They were based on the handmade Little People dolls created by art student Xavier Roberts, who had been selling his original soft sculpture creations at craft shows for several years before the mass-market version took off. each doll came with its own birth certificate and adoption papers, making them feel less like toys and more like characters kids could genuinely take care of, right down to naming them and celebrating their birthdays. They were first sold at craft fairs before landing at Babyland General Hospital, a converted clinic in Georgia turned into a doll nursery where visitors could watch new dolls being born. They became a massive hit, setting toy industry sales records 3 years running, and demand grew so intense during the 1983 holiday season that it sparked genuine stampedes and shoving matches in toy store aisles, a moment now remembered as one of the defining images of holiday shopping chaos in America. The name came from the original story that the dolls had been discovered growing in a magical cabbage patch, a whimsical backstory that only added to their charm for the children who owned them. Because each doll's face was generated with slight variations by the manufacturing process, no two were ever perfectly identical, which only fed into the idea that every single doll was one of a kind, further encouraging the sense of ownership and attachment that made them such a phenomenon in the first place. In the 1980s, a group of young actors became famous for starring together in coming-of-age films aimed at teenagers, and the press dubbed them the Brat Pack. The nickname was coined in a 1985 New York Magazine profile of the group, a label the actors themselves reportedly weren't thrilled about at the time, since it carried a slightly mocking tone in the original article. Core members included Emilio Estevez, Anthony Michael Hall, Rob Lowe, Andrew McCarthy, Demi Moore, Judd Nelson, Molly Ringwald, and Ali Sheedy, though the exact roster has always been a bit of a debate depending on who you ask. Their films, including The Breakfast Club and St. Elmo's Fire, are often seen as the defining movies of the group, capturing teenage identity, friendship, and anxiety in a way that felt more honest than most youth films that came before them. These stars and their movies left a lasting mark on 80s youth culture and cinema, influencing everything from fashion to the way high school social dynamics were portrayed on screen for years afterward. Emilio Estevez was often called the unofficial leader of the group, and he and Demi Moore were briefly engaged at one point, adding to the sense that the group's off-screen lives were just as closely followed as their on-screen roles. Some of the actors later said the label ended up typecasting them and made it harder to land more mature roles once they aged out of playing teenagers, even as the films they made together only grew more beloved with time and are still regularly rewatched and referenced decades later.
And there you have it, 10 unforgettable pieces of 1980s culture that helped shape an entire generation. From quarter-fed arcade cabinets to VHS tapes, from teased-out glam metal hair to a magical Cabbage Patch full of dolls waiting to be adopted. If even one of these brought back a memory you hadn't thought about in years, then this video already did exactly what it set out to do. What's incredible about the 80s is how much of it still echoes through pop culture today. The music still gets played at parties, the movies still get rewatched on lazy weekends, and somewhere out there, a Rubik's Cube is probably still sitting in a junk drawer waiting for someone to give it one more shot. The decade may be long over, but the nostalgia it left behind clearly isn't going anywhere. Now, I want to hear from you. Out of everything we covered today, which one hit the hardest? Was it the sound of quarters dropping into an arcade machine? The excitement of picking out a movie at Blockbuster? Or maybe it was watching your favorite band's video pop up on MTV for the very first time. Drop a comment down below and tell me your favorite 80s memory. I read every single one, and I love seeing which of these hits closest to home for you. If you enjoyed this trip back in time, do me a huge favor and smash that like button. It genuinely helps this channel grow and lets more people discover these nostalgia deep dives. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next trip down memory lane. Because trust me, we've got a lot more decades left to explore. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.